Hello and welcome to Mann's Model Moments. In this episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the One D&D Unearthed Arcana playtest material and just going through that with some pros and cons of what we can look forward to in 2024 when Wizards of the Coast actually release their new version of D&D. So it's a little bit different from some of the other content I produced in the model area. I have put out some D&D videos from our playgroup, but this is going to be more of an in-depth analysis of what Wizards of the Coast have in mind for the new rules coming in 2024. First though, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who's subscribed to the channel. We're now on the way to 1,200 subscribers, which will date this video, I'm sure. I never thought that the channel would really grow in the way that it's grown over the past month, so thank you to everybody there. So I've done a couple of things along the way to help improve the quality of these videos for you. Firstly, I've got a new microphone. You may have noticed the quality of the audio changed about a month or so ago, maybe, in some of the videos. That takes a little while for them to sift through because some of the material I record was prior to that. But also, I've invested in a new camera lens. So some of the quality of the zoom shots that I was doing was mainly through digital zoom, which isn't great, and also it's harder to focus in that way. So got a new Pentax lens for my DSLR. So hopefully you'll start to see the quality of those shots when I'm actually building models improve. I've also started a Patreon. So if you really want to support the channel, you can go to Patreon. I've got several levels of support there. So we have a Discord community, which will start with the Patreon. We've got some merch, we've got some stickers, mugs and t-shirts. I'll be doing raffles when we get to a certain threshold of Patreon subscribers. So it's just in its infancy, it's just literally started, brand new. So if you want to support the channel physically and materially, that is the best way to do it. That helps me continue to invest in these materials to help improve the content. And also with some of those Patreon levels will be things like voting on what videos you want to see next from a list of what I've got in the pipeline, along with things like giveaways and the higher tiers, like enabling you to actually work with me on a topic and go through that. So if there's a specific kit you want me to build, specific things you want to see, like particular weathering types, rust or whatever. So started that, we'll see where it goes. I've no particular expectations on that, and just your subscription is fantastic support. So thank you for all of that. So without any further ado, let's get into One D&D, the Unearthed Arcana 2022, which I have rather provocatively called Woke Dollars and Digital. So if you go to the D&DBeyond website, I'll put links to all of this in the description below. This was announced a few weeks ago. The feedback was actually open yesterday. I took part in the playtest of the materials, the feedback, gave all of that yesterday. My voice is one amongst thousands, I'm sure. So that opens until the 15th of September, I believe. So if you're interested in having your voice, if you disagree with what I say, if you agree with what I say, download the materials from D&D Beyond. You do need to be a D&D Beyond member. You need to sign up for that, but it's all free. You can have a look at the Unearthed Arcana 2022 document and go through and see what you think and give that feedback to Wizards of the Coast. So first off, props to Wizards of the Coast for actually doing this, to having a beta and welcoming feedback. I think that's a really positive move. A lot of companies don't do that. But it's in the best interest of everybody concerned, right? The better feedback they get, the more willing players are to buy into the next edition. They've acknowledged that 5th edition is pretty solid and that One D&D is really going to be an evolution of that, which then really makes me question, well, why are they doing it? And there are a couple of things that are then revealed in the video. The first of which is one of the later things, which is the digital aspect. So they're driving or trying to drive traffic and membership of D&D Beyond and digital content, and actually having digital like video dungeons and stuff. Now, I don't think that's a great idea. D&D has always been about imagination. And I think the more it goes towards a video game, the more you erode that theatre of the mind. Yes, we use minis or maps or other things. You can run completely theatre of the mind, of course, but a lot of people use these tools because it just helps. People are visual. But I think once you start getting into a video game sort of depiction, and we've had hybrid games in the past, board games which were also, enhanced with, either visual overlays or with tablets and things. And I'm not sure that I particularly want that in my game. So that is a first thing. And then the other thing is, of course, well, why drive that digital move? Why drive stuff through D&D Beyond? Of course, most of the features D&D Beyond are paid for. So it's dollars. So for me, this is a bit of a cash grab. I think it's pretty much unnecessary. I think an evolution of the rules, an update, a refresh is a good idea. There's a lot of material being published since 2014. But does it need a new edition? I don't think so. And, then I come back to the first bit, the woke D&D piece. Those of you who know me will know that I don't think Wokism is a good thing. And I say that with the caveat that I think equality is absolutely necessary. It's a fundamental of people. I don't think that means ramming political content down people's throats in a fancy role-playing game. I see the same thing in things like Hollywood media. So I'm going to mention She-Hulk and Amazon's Rings of Power. I think they're creatively a dumpster fire. We saw it in Star Wars. We've seen it in other franchises, and it's destroying creative writing. If I look at the series that I've really enjoyed, that have really good character development, that have really good writing, they are not mainstream Hollywood media. And I think mainstream is actually a perversion of that kind of characteristic, because actually they're preaching to a very select Hollywood mentality area. These people they don't understand what it's like to be a blue-collar worker in the Rust Belt in America. They don't know what it's like in Europe. So they're addressing a lot of problems that I just do not see in the UK, that I do not see in Europe. Yes, there will always be little pockets of inequality and stuff, but for the past 20, 30 years that I've been working in industry, my very first boss was a woman back in 1995. I've worked for female bosses and colleagues alongside. In life sciences, it's a little bit more even, I think, than other areas. So we're about 50-50, maybe 55-45, but it's around the 50-50 mark of employees, male and female. And there is no pay discrepancy anywhere there. There is respect shown all the way through that. Now, whether it's different in entertainment, sure, I can see that, because a lot of the roles in entertainment are sexualized, both male and female, and that tends to drive towards the edges. But I don't think that's mainstream society. I don't see that. So I think this push to this extreme equality where everything has to be the same and everything's based on quotas is damaging. I think it's a fad. I think it will pass, and we will get back to sanity in future years. So I have provocatively called this woke D&D. Digital and dollars and digital. I think the primary motivation for it is dollars. I think Wizards of the Coast are picking up on that kind of woke movement in Hollywood and, in some parts of the US, particularly the West Coast. And I don't think that's good for the game. So there are a couple of reasons why I think that. One is D&D is by far and away, from what I've seen, the single most inclusive community anywhere. I'm not just talking in gaming, I'm just talking of general. You see everybody represented. You see straight, you see gay, you see trans, you see male, you see female, you see every kind of colour and creed and spectrum of society in there. Probably not so much religious representation, just because of the kind of I'd say content of D&D kind of does go a little bit against religion, I suppose. I'm not saying that religious people don't play D&D. I'm just thinking that that's probably a smaller segment than the group, but then that's probably reflective of society anyway. So for the most inclusive group in the world of players to then say you have to be more inclusive and put that in the core rules, by the way of like, oh, races aren't inherently evil and all this, I think is quite frankly bullshit. I think it detracts from the character and the storytelling of the whole genre. For instance, orcs, and Grumsh not being an evil conquering god, but just being a mighty warrior and stuff. What? I would much rather be an orc who has bucked the trend of his tribe, who has a realization that this is wrong, what we're doing as a people, and bucks that trend and is in exile and becomes an adventurer. That to me is a much more interesting story than like, oh yeah, he's another one of the great strong warrior race. It's like, and that kind of goes through the character origins that I'm going to talk. So let's get back to the material. So the Unearthed Arcana 2022 starts with character origins. So it's written by Jeremy Crawford, Christopher Perkins, and Ray Winnegar. And they are kind of the gurus and mentors and custodians of 5th E. But what I see in this document there are two pieces, okay? The good stuff and the bad stuff. And it does seem the good stuff, broadly speaking, are the clarifications, are the cleanups, are the little, polishes on what already exists, the kind of stuff that would be in a normal Unearthed Arcana, or that is then adopted as playtest material, and then goes into the rules. And then there is the shift. And the shift stuff, I think, generally is also shit. So, and let me explain why I think that. So first of all, character origins. Choosing a character, you can choose a character race. Now, we've seen this in Tasha's, and again, I will say right off the bat here, I have an issue with Tasha's. The first thing I have with Tasha's is they called it Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, when we already had Xanthar's Guide to Everything. My players and DMs that know me would know this is a pet bugbear of mine. It's like, come on, wizards. English is such a rich and diverse language. We have begged, borrowed, and stolen from languages across the world for thousands of years. And you have to use the same word. You couldn't think of another word. I mean, come on. It's lazy. And I think that kind of reflects back to the kind of lack of creativity that I mentioned in the kind of Hollywood stream and lack of creative writing. And also a failure of imagination, right? So if we go to character races, there's now this move towards shifting ability score increases to background away from race, which by itself is kind of like whatever, but then actually getting into the races themselves, they've made a few tweaks and changed stuff, and most of it is pretty bland, and there are some pieces here which are good and bad, and I don't really want to go through too much of this because it's, humans, for instance, now gain inspiration whenever they finish a long rest. It's like inspiration has been watered down. I'll come to that later. But gaining inspiration when you finish a long rest, it's just a mechanic that happens. You gain inspiration. It's like, well, how interesting is that? It's like, what story does that tell? It's like I wake up in the morning and it's just like, today I feel it's going to be a good day in some small way, some point during it. And it's just 1 week inspiration. You don't have to have done anything to that. You just have to have literally existed. So again, it's just meh. You gain the skilled feat or another first level feat of your choice. So I'll come back to this. So now everybody gets a feat. And I think this is one of the problems of a lot of things now is, how much of a Mary Sue are they trying to make people? Everybody gets a feat at first level. One of the good things about feats in 5th E is that they're optional, so you don't have to use them, and they cost you. So if you're going to be a variant human and want a feat, you have to sacrifice getting a +1 ability score in everything, okay? Which arguably is not that strong. I don't know, a lot of people homebrew. I do. So for us, actually, you get +2 in an ability as a human as well as the +1s. Anybody can take a feat at first level, but you have to sacrifice your +2. So yes, you gain a feat, but you lose that increase in ability score, which is a big thing. With bounded accuracy, the loss of a +2 in a skill, which is a +1 to your ability rolls or attack rolls, wherever you put that, is a big thing. So it makes a difficult choice. And this is it. Interesting choices in games are really what drive good games. And it's one of the reasons that D&D is so good and has always been so good, because you can do anything. So there are always interesting choices. And I think the more that you homogenize and dumb down this stuff so that everybody is special. There's a great scene in The Incredibles. If you haven't seen The Incredibles, where have you been living under a rock? Go and see it. It's great, even if you're not a kid. Where he says that, where one of the characters says that everybody's special, which means that nobody is. And it's exactly that. If everybody is the same level, how does that make you feel special? Everyone's got to feel it. It's like, well, yeah, so I can do this. It's like, so what? So I get that where they're trying to go for, I just don't think this works. The other thing is that the feats you can get at one level vary widely in power. Some are just like, this bullshit, and others, like Lucky, are just like, this is one of the strongest feats ever, and I can just do that from existing. It's crazy. Anyway, so you have various different types of race, and they're all much of a muchness, so they've tweaked and changed little things, and some are good and some are bad. I don't really want to go through all of the different races, because that's not where really the interesting stuff lies, because they've taken it out of race. So really, you've got a couple of choices. You can be a dwarf, and you get +1 hit point for every level. So if you want to be some sort of, tanky class, dwarves will automatically pushed up. Or you can be an elf, because elves get some magic and stuff, but also they can finish a long rest in 4 hours. So it's not like before, where they can transfer 4 hours, but they still need 8 hours to take a long rest. No. Now they can take a long rest in 4 hours, and that is mechanically important for some of the other changes they've made. So those are your two real strong choices. Everything else is kind of like, bleh. Halflings haven't really changed that much, apart from now they're all naturally stealthy, apparently. Orcs, not half-orcs, orcs. Orcs aren't evil. They're a little bit more like the monstrous orcs. They get to dash, they get the adrenaline rush thing. But, again, powerful build, they can push stuff more. They still get relentless endurance. It's all a bit bland. So then becomes character backgrounds, where they pushed now the stat increases into. And this is where I have my real first bugbear with this rule set. Or this playtest material, I should say. And that is, so character backgrounds. So I'm going to read here. Build a background by using the rules in the Build Your Background section, or select a pre-made background from the sample backgrounds, or select a pre-made background from the sample background section, and then customize it with the rules in the Build Your Background section. This basically means now that all backgrounds are the same. So choose whatever you like, call it whatever you like, and you've got it. Because if you don't like anything in your background, so if I don't like, +2 wisdom and +1 intelligence, my ability scores for an acolyte, I just change that. If I don't like my skill proficiencies in insight and religion, I want athletics and acrobatics. I could do that. Now, in one sense, I can see many people would think, yeah, that's a great idea. I could be an acolyte of a god who, of Tor or Helm or, a martial god, and it's all about prowess and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's fine. But the description here, you devoted yourself to service in a temple, I've nestled in it doesn't go with that, right? And this has always been possible, okay? You've always been able to customize backgrounds as a discussion with your dungeon master. And this, I think, is why putting all of this into the main rules is a real mistake, because it takes out dialogue. D&D is a collaborative game run by the dungeon master for the players. And it's all together. It's not adversarial. People get this wrong about D&D. It isn't the dungeon master trying to kill the party. The dungeon master, if he kills the party, it's a failure of the dungeon master and the players. Right? Because the dungeon master has set up a scenario and the players have responded to it in a way that's resulted in death for everybody. Nobody wins, right? A good DM should present real threats to the party, so things that could kill them, and the party should respond in a way that doesn't get them killed. They basically shouldn't do stupid shit, right? And so that is a relationship. It's a balance. It's a discussion. It's communication. And I think anything that removes that communication is a bad thing. And I think that's what this does. So I'm going to be an acolyte. I'm going to have +2 intelligence and +1 strength. And I'm going to take athletics and stealth. And my tool proficiency are going to be bagpipes. It's like, I'm going to take Abyssal as my language and a different feat as well. What's the point in calling it an acolyte? Or I can create my own. So to me, this isn't versatility. This isn't adding options. This is homogenization. So why choose different backgrounds when you can just make up whatever you like or customize things however you like? It's just, to me, it takes the flavor out. It's basically, you get a 5-course meal and you blend it all together and then you proportion it out. It's exactly the same constituents, but it now just all tastes like a bunch of mixed meh. And that, to me, is the difference between having distinct flavors in your races and your backgrounds and having this mush. Yeah. So on that fundamental level, I think this is a terrible idea. I think moving ability scores to a background, I can kind of see pluses, minuses. Actually, I can kind of see it would be neat if there were some which were associated with race and some which were associated with background, because that could produce some interesting combinations and things which could make sense. It would require a bit of work, right? So, for instance, if you were a half-orc soldier and you get, extra strength or constitution from being a half-orc, and you get, athletics and stuff from being a soldier, that would work really well for a fighter build. And you can understand that, right? It makes sense. Rather than that you've worked in a monastery or that you've been a fisherman, and now you're this supreme. Because remember, characters are not normal people. Characters are the cream of the crop. But you've gone from, being a fisherman now to suddenly you realised you were Superman. And this is it. It's that kind of like going up to Mary Sue without having to work for it. And I think that fosters the idea then that level 0 characters going to level 1 are just these supreme superhumans, rather than, they're exceptional for normal people, but they're not Superman. They're not Captain Marvel. They can't just go and save the universe right there and then. They've got to build to it. And that's one of the rewarding things about D&D, is that they build skills over time. And I think all of this erodes that. It feels like it's the sea cutting away at the base of the cliff. So that's my take on the background features, which I think is a great grey slab of sludge. And I really, really dislike it. So let's take a quick look at feats. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time because I already think first level feats are a bad idea, as presented here. Now, not that I think that first level feats couldn't be good. A very small thing at first level to show that you are exceptional. I mean, you've already got all this other stuff that's exceptional. Your character ability scores, for instance, are way above the 10 across the board of a normal human or humanoid. But here you've got things like alert. You get your proficiency bonus to your initiative roll. You can swap your initiative with the initiative of a willing ally at the beginning. Now, this all sounds good, right? Now, imagine you've got a typical party of 4 individuals. What if they all take alert? I mean, that could cause some real shit, right? And it could be really powerful as well. Basically, the group get to choose what order they go in. Because this isn't now like a variant human. And you can have a party of all variant humans, but that restricts you in a lot of other ways, like nobody has dark vision. Next up, we got crafter. You're adept at crafting things. You get proficiency with 3 different types of artisans' tools, and you can get discount off non-magical items and make non-magical items quicker. I mean, that in comparison to some is like real, like basically it's like, oh, you're a really good normal person. And it's like, okay. And it could be quite good for roleplay, but can you see power gamers using that? Or, in fact, most gamers using that? You have healer. They've changed the healer feat a bit. Now you can use it to expend use for healer's kit and tend to a creature, and they get to use one of their hit dice. So it's actually going almost back to some prior editions of D&D where you use things to enable them to use their hit dice. And then you roll that die and they get a number of hit points plus your proficiency bonus. There are quite a few things that come back to adding proficiency bonus, which in general I think is a good mechanic because it scales with level. The way it's implemented here is a bit slapdash. So actually proficiency bonus hit points increase isn't a huge amount because proficiency bonus doesn't change a massive amount over your career. So, when you're getting up to high levels, +5, when you're level 14 to hit points, it's like, whatever. And you get to re-roll ones on healing dice with that. And it's like, okay, that's pretty weak now, actually. Then you come to lucky. So lucky, you got luck points. Now luck points are equal to your proficiency bonus. Okay, now we've just massively, so you've nerfed it a little bit at low levels because you only get 2 to start with. But at high levels, 14th, you're getting 5 uses of lucky. Holy crap. And it applies to any test. D20 test, which, oh my god, I'll get back to D20 test. So why wouldn't everybody take lucky as a first level feat? It's just, to me, if you take crafter over lucky, props to you for being an excellent role player, but I cannot see that happening. I'm just sorry, I just can't see that happening. You got musician. You get 3 musical instrument proficiencies, and you can use a short or long rest. As you finish a short or long rest, you can play a song which you have tool proficiency with and give inspiration to allies who hear the song. And the number of allies you can affect in this way equals your proficiency bonus. That is crap. I'm just going to straight out say that's crap. It would be better if inspiration stacked. But again, going back, if you've now got a full party of humans, they all get inspiration on a long rest anyway. So this is literally useless. So it's as though these pieces, these added pieces, haven't been designed with the changes that they've made in other areas at all, because there are so many areas where the things just cross over each other or just really fuck each other over. It's stupid. There are some others here, Magic Initiate, Savage Attacker, Skill, so they've gone over a lot of these, and generally, tough is still as it was as a first level feat, so you can get 2 more hit points. So again, that's pretty good. The other thing they've introduced is repeatable feats, so feats that can happen again. So Magic Initiate, you can take more than once, but you must choose a different spell list every time you do it, which I think is pretty dumb, actually, that you've got to choose a different spell list each time. Why can't you actually just be a wizard with Magic Initiate, because you want to expand your cantrips, for instance, who's just really good, really into it, super focused. To me, that would make sense. It's a really good way of building out your cantrip list. And there's other spells, first level spells that you might want once per long rest, because that's when it resets, like Mage Armor. There's a lot of different ways you can think of it, but having to choose from a different spell list each time, I'll come back to the spell list, because that's actually a good idea. So yeah, dumb. Just dumb. So let's skip over the rest of the feats, and let's now go to the rules glossary, because here, this is a real mixed bag. So the first thing that's mentioned are arcane spells, which then draws us into the other spells. Arcane spells, divine spells, and primal spells. So they basically cut up all of the spellbook. Instead of having it for bards and sorts of stuff, they now have arcane spells, which bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards harness. Artificers as well. Then you've got divine spells, which are for clerics, druids and stuff, and then primal spells, which are more for your barbarians and things. I think that is a really good idea. That's neat. It's because the whole bard, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, paladins, there's a lot of spellcasters. Every time you bring a new one in, you've got to do it. So this is a good way of future-proofing your rule set. So this is actually a really neat little change. It's small, seems small, but it's actually very broad. So it's a good change. Artisan's tools. You ignore all the prices. Now they all cost 15 gold pieces. Now the D20 test. The term D20 test encompasses the 3 main D20 rolls of the game: ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. If something in the game affects D20 tests, it affects all 3 of these rolls. So now they are not taking attack rolls, saving throws, and ability tests as separate checks. They're just saying they're all D20 tests. DM determines whether a D20 test is warranted in any given circumstance. To be warranted, a D20 test must have a target number no less than 5 and no greater than 30. Yeah, fine. Rolling a 1. If you roll a 1 on the D20, the D20 test automatically fails regardless of any modifiers to the roll. On everything. On ability checks. Attack rolls. Yeah, fine. We're used to attack rolls. Saving throws. No. Doesn't matter what you've got. Doesn't matter if you've got a plus 12 DC 10 saving throw. You roll a 1 now, you fail. That's shit. It just undermines some of the basic premises of things like reliable talent, high-level characters being, really good at stuff because they've worked hard and are now, close to godlike. But no, they've always got a 5% chance of failing the most basic of tasks. And yes, it is down to the DM. They have put in that caveat: the DM determines whether a D20 test is warranted in any given circumstance. This rule, to me, it's stupid, but as a DM, I could manage this, because you'll get the flip side, which I didn't mention, is that rolling a 20 automatically succeeds. Okay, so they've basically taken what happens with attack rolls, the bounded accuracy, and transferred it to the rest of the game, which is quite game-breaking, actually. It's a small change that really fucks things up, and it's the stupidest thing in this entire document. Now, if a player says, I want to talk to my god or do something other, utterly ridiculous, a DM always has the right to say no. And as an experienced DM, I would, right? It's like, yeah, you do, nothing happens. That's fine. But I'm not thinking of myself here. I'm thinking of new DMs. If you're an inexperienced DM, particularly if you're a bit nervous, which DMs often are when they start, or younger, and don't have that self-confidence, and you have strong players in your group, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to roll this. What ability check do you want me to roll? Intelligence, I roll it. I've got a 20, I've succeeded. No matter how stupid or dumb or improbable they've actually want to do happens. Or say you get say you're the clumsiest git in the world. Yeah, you've got like 6 decks, a massive minus on your roll. And you can do something really tough. You want to, leap and catch an arrow or something. It's like, yeah, it's DC 25. There's no way that you could achieve that. But if you roll 20, now you can. Just 5% of chance of doing anything. That's the way it will be interpreted by a lot of players. And putting it in the core rules really undermines DMs, especially younger or newer DMs, those without experience or confidence. And I think that's a hugely bad thing for the game. Again, it undermines the conversation. And I think there's a number of things they've done in these rules which undermine that communication, that dialogue, which really is the heart of D&D. So, D20 test, by far and away the dumbest thing in this document. And if they implement that, that'll be the one single thing that means I won't buy into woke D&D when it comes out. I will continue playing 5th, as I'm sure a lot of people will. And this, One D&D will be one of those editions that just doesn't get the traction. Critical hits haven't really changed. Divine spells we've already mentioned. Gaming set, those all just cost a gold piece now. Again, whatever. Another a number of pieces. The first one here was grappled condition. But they've changed things like grappled, incapacitated. They've also added slowed. Oh, and unarmed strikes, which basically they've cleaned and tidied up some of the rules on it. So grappled now, you no longer have grappled and restrained. You just have grappled, and that covers basically all of it. So your speed is 0. You have disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the attacker. So, if you're going to punch the guy that's got you, that's fine. The grappler can drag or carry you, but they suffer the slowed condition. And there's a bit on escape as well. So this is quite neat, actually, because grappled and restrained confuses even experienced players sometimes. And I think putting them together into one combined condition is actually a good thing. Because grappled basically does nothing other than, like, your speed is now 0. It's like, oh, okay. Whereas restrained is actually pretty crippling. So making this homogenized See, I said homogenized was a bad thing, and now I'm going to contradict myself. Making this united sort of hybrid, let's call it a hybrid, because that doesn't sound homogenized. Making this hybrid condition now is actually a good thing. Same with incapacitated. They've clarified things like your concentration is broken. We actually had that come up in a game, I think 2 weeks ago for myself, and I had to check. And a lot of players thought, no, it doesn't break concentration. Yes, it does, incapacitated. So even my players, we've been playing our campaign for 4 years. So they've, a lot of them experienced players before that. So still something that causes confusion. So again, I think having all of that in incapacitated is a good thing. So all of those clarifications, good job. All stuff that could have been in a UA as normal and adopted into 50 rules without any problem at all. Now we move on to inspiration. Now, inspiration is a bit of a love it, hate it thing anyway. Some people don't use it at the gaming table. But what they've done now is they've both watered down the effect of inspiration. So now it just imposes advantage before you roll the die as well, which is a change. So that weakens it. So you can't see whether you pass or fail before using inspiration. You can't leap for something, it looks like you're going to miss, and you just push yourself that extra bit and grab the ledge. It's like, no, now you've got to be like, okay, I'm focused, and you roll your 2 dice, and 16 and 18, it's like, yeah, you make it no problem, and you would have done anyway. So that weakens the actual mechanical effect. But now, you gain inspiration by rolling a 20 on a d20. Any d20 test, you roll a 20, you get inspiration. Okay. So there's a lot more inspiration around. It's weaker, but there's more of it. So that's a good thing, right? You can only have one at a time. So it's like the DM wants to reward you for doing, particularly good role play, or, just it's been epic, and, you want to grant the whole party inspiration. But they all, in combat, at some point they all rolled a 20, so it is meaningless. So again, this takes away DM agency. So the DM, it says the DM can also award inspiration, but let's face it, the likelihood of you having an opportunity to reward inspiration when anybody can benefit from it is probably going to be pretty low now. So it's just crap, You also lose it at the start of a long rest now. It's like, okay, so it's now weaker, more abundant, but transient. It's like, it's just, again, I'm going back to how bland that feels as opposed to inspiration, even as it is now. We homebrew inspiration in the games that I play in and DM to make it a bit more exciting, interesting, adaptable. This is moving in the opposite direction. I'm sorry. Now, bear in mind, you've just lost that inspiration at the start of a long rest, right? And you're going to have a long rest now, which is still 8 hours, 6 hours of sleep, no other activities other than light activities of 2 hours. And at the end, you get all your usual stuff. If you interrupt the rest by 1 hour of walking, casting spells, or similar activity, you lose it. You don't get any benefit from it. Yeah, fair enough. It's also interrupted by combat. Any combat. It doesn't specify how long. It says if it's interrupted by combat, the long rest is stopped. So you just lost all your inspiration. You are 7.5 hours into your long rest, and 2 goblins are sent from the big army that's just over the ridge to harass you. You get into combat, you lose all the benefits of the long rest, and now the big fight happens. You've got no inspiration. You're probably going to be exhausted. Or maybe they wait half an hour, so it's been a full 24 hours, so then you haven't had a long rest, you get a level of exhaustion, and now they attack. It's just like, this is such a bad idea. I get, and a lot of groups actually do that combat interrupts a long rest, but I think there's a sliding scale. This is absolutely digital now. It's like, and it doesn't specify combat at the moment. So combat in the games I play in doesn't interrupt a long rest, provided it doesn't, extend if it's a big combat. And I think that's the clue here. I think if you had, for instance, for every round that a combat occurs in a long rest, your long rest is extended by an hour because you've had to exert and you need an extra hour long rest, that would work, right? And if it goes over, 5 rounds, then all benefits are gone. So Then there is an onus on the party to, if you attack during a long rest, you've got to finish it quick. Otherwise, no benefit. And that makes sense, right? If you're expending a lot of resources when you're supposed to be resting, yeah, if you're just hacking a couple of goblins, come on. And it doesn't depend on level. Maybe you could link it to proficiency bonus. If the combat goes for more than the number of rounds of your proficiency bonus, you lose the long rest. So higher level characters can actually deal with interrupted sleep more than lower level. Again, that makes sense. Nothing on that at all. So I think that's a bad mechanic. It's badly thought out. But do you remember at the beginning of this, where we talked about race, elves finish a long rest in 4 hours, not 8. So now, why wouldn't you have a party just of elves? Because you get 4-hour long rests. You can screw the world. You go around interrupting people, just exhaust everybody till they're dead. This is a small change. Doesn't seem much, but it has wider implications. And again, I think it's a clumsy rule. Musical instruments now cost 20 gold pieces each. Yeah, I don't understand the rationale for making everything cost the same. Again, it makes everything bland. It's like, okay, I'm going to buy a harp, it's 20 gold. I'm going to buy a small flute, that's 20 gold. It's like, what? This small wooden flute is the same as this ornate harp. It's like, fuck off. It's like, just keep things granular. I understand dumbing stuff down, but good God, this is like elementary school level. It's like, oh, everything costs the same. So now let's talk about tool proficiencies. Tool proficiencies, if you have a proficiency with a tool, you can add your proficiency bonus to any ability check you make when you use that tool. If you have proficiency in the skill that's also used with that check, you have advantage on that check too. This functionality means you can benefit from both skill proficiency and tool proficiency on the same ability check. That is a good idea. So at the moment, and actually it's something that I will retrospectively put into my games going forward, because tools basically are a bit in 50, and this is a good way of actually making them count for something. So again, it builds in your background. So I can see an argument for, say you've got proficiency in carpenter's tools, and you're a rogue, and you're going to cross this big wooden room. I would argue that a player could use their carpenter's tool proficiency on their stealth check to spot where, using their knowledge of wood and the ability to work wood, of where the weak points might be, just in the way things, that kind of thing's quite neat. So that's a good, again, it's one of those clarification rules kind of amendments pieces which could have just been put in a UA and adopted as 5th edition material without any issues. Piece on Tremor Sense, I mentioned an Arm Strike, and then the spell list, which they have divided into the Arcane, the Divine, and then the Primal. And I think actually the Primal includes the Druid spells rather than Divine, which is more like Paladins and Clerics. So it's a real mixed bag. Overall, the pieces which are good are the specific rules amendments and cleanups and, little pieces. That's not to say that all of those rules amendments and tweaks are good, because some of them, like the D20 test, Inspiration, and Long Rest, are utterly terrible. The two biggest pieces are the background, which is now essentially a homogenized, meaningless mess, and the D20 test, which breaks the fundamental tenets of a lot of pieces of the game, and that communication, I think, it'll make it much harder for new DMs. A lot of the pieces in here, I think, will make it much harder for DMs just starting off. I think experienced DMs will take a lot of this and just be like, no, I'll use this and I'll use that, and actually probably take some of these elements and put them back into 5th E if One D&D actually becomes this. The other elements I think that are not welcome are the kind of woke pieces about, everybody's the same, everybody's equal, it's like, equality doesn't mean that everyone's the same. Everybody has different abilities. Men and women have different abilities and different skills. I'm a biologist, and there was a bell-shaped curve. So men's spatial awareness tends to be, on average, better than female spatial awareness. That is a biological thing. But there is a bell-shaped curve, and some women are much better than men, and some men are much worse than women. Women tend to be better at things like multitasking. But again, it's a bell-shaped curve. Some women can't multitask to save their life, and some men are very good at it. But bell-shaped curves that are overlapped. And the averages, changed. Some might be close together, some might be the same, some are far apart. That doesn't take away the equal worth of men and women. It just means we should celebrate what we're good at, and we can look and laugh at the things we're not so good at. I'm terrible at multitasking. I make no bounds about it. But I'm actually tidier than my girlfriend, which is, I would say, statistically speaking, slightly out of character. Not that I'm a tidy person. So I don't like the kind of political backwash seeping in here. It seems to be very much catered for a West Coast America younger liberal audience, which the game already has in spades. And if you want to appeal to more, I would say less of this would be welcome, and just have fantasy be fantasy. Have strong evil, strong good, and let people become heroes. That's what people really want. It's escapism. I don't want real-world politics reflected in my role-playing game. Thank you very much. The good points of this are details around how fine bits of the rules work, which would work in 50 equally as well as a new edition. And I don't think a new edition is required. I think a new edition is simply to refresh the franchise, if you like. D&D has become a lot more popular since 2012 to 14, when, the next D&D was trialed and became 5th edition. Thanks to Critical Role, thanks to things like Stranger Things. There's much more awareness and acceptance of it, and I think now the plan is we're going to release the new edition. I was speaking of this as a business person as well. I can see that kind of thing in it. We're going to release this new edition to appeal to the current political climate in 2024, to a young upcoming generation. Just as an aside, Gary Gygax was not young when he wrote D&D. He was in his 30s. He was in his late 30s, 40s when AD&D was released, which is current 1st edition. But it still appealed to me as a 12-year-old boy. Many years later, actually, when he was in his 40s. So I think trying to specifically cater to a demographic which is already very well represented in the rules doesn't help expand D&D. I would actually, if I was in a planning meeting in Wizards of the Coast, on a purely business sense, I would say I don't think this is going to increase our footfall. It is designed to get dollars out of existing players, and that generation hope that it breeds in there. So I think the push to digital also reflects that. I don't think it's going to appeal to, us older people, generations who have been used to, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th edition, or even 5th edition, to be honest. I like video games. I love, playing stuff like Dark Souls and, other RPGs, Pathfinder RPG I've played. I play a lot of that sort of stuff. It's separate and different to D&D. And I don't think trying to introduce digital has any other place here other than to drive people into subscribing to paid D&D Beyond content and driving that cash bottom line. So I think this is a cash grab. I think it's a response to a political landscape. And I don't think overall it's a very good Unearthed Arcana. So I don't know what the feedback will be overall. I expect a lot of people will disagree with me. I know some people do agree with me, and I've seen elements of this, but there's some real stinkers in here. Those two that I mentioned, the background and D20 test, are two of the biggest ones. There are some others like the long rest piece, Inspiration, which is a bleh anyway. I just hope that some of the feedback gets back to Wizards of the Coast and they change some of this stuff and tone it down and alter it. So please get involved in the playtest. go to Wizards of the Coast, download that material. Links are all in the description below. And let's see what One D&D could actually become in 2024 rather than what we've been presented here. And let's hope this does not reflect the final content. But props to Wizards of the Coast to actually doing this and doing it 2 years out. Gives them a good chance to go through this and actually test the demographic and hash stuff out. Maybe they're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's good. I want to make sure that some of these things don't stick, because I think it would be very bad for the game, particularly new DMs and, by iteration, new players, because new players don't have a good experience in their first few games. They're not going to come back. I had a great experience the very first. It wasn't even a game. It was kind of just played out actually on my school desk with my friend, just a little window into that. And it was like, I want more of this. And when I played my first game, it was like, this is incredible. That's the experience that we want to foster in new players, not what the fuck is this? Okay, that's all I have to say now. Thank you for listening to me drone on for this amount of time. I will be back next week with a full build. Some of the community feedback has been that you want to see larger scale, so I'm going to be looking at some 48th scale aircraft and some 35th scale armor. So I've also got a few more tips and tricks, top 10 videos. I'm going to be coming back and looking at airbrushes, what to actually look for in an airbrush, what I recommend you start off with if you're just getting into that, and then how to develop that later on. So look forward to seeing you then. Till then, I hope you have many good modelling moments of your own. See you next time. That's all for this instalment of Mann's Model Moments. Please like, subscribe and share this video if you enjoyed it. It's the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like it. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.